Hi, and welcome to Deep Dive with Jamie Stein, where we take a deep dive look at all things reality TV, pop culture, and the world at large. I'm an intuitive and an empath, which means I pick up on the thoughts, feelings, and energy percolating in other people and the world around me. I believe there is meaning waiting to be found at every turn if you're willing to see it. So join me as we dismantle everything from trash TV to high spiritual concepts and learn more about ourselves, each other, and how we're all connected. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Deep Dive with Jamie Stein. The first episode of 2025. Happy New Year, everyone. I hope everyone had a great holiday season, or at the very least, a meaningful holiday season. I know it's been a minute since I recorded and released an episode. What can I say? The end of the year came on really strong. I think I'm learning I'm someone who really takes the inward hibernation of the winter solstice and the end of the year to heart. Definitely felt a really deep impulse just to slow down, like I said, go inward and not really push too hard in terms of output. I'm also aware, like many others, of just how much has been going on in the world right now. We've had a new president take office. Obviously, our political landscape is incredibly divisive right now. We've had the LA fires, which I actually am going to touch on in a moment. We have plane crashes. I mean, you don't need me to enumerate everything. It's a very hot, alive time right now, I think, in the collective. And I also think for many of us on a personal, individual level, I know many, 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 many people, both friends, loved ones, and clients who are going through it on a very, very deep level. And on that note, it's just my own body has been telling me to take it easy. So that's what I've been doing. That said, felt the impulse to dust off this microphone and ease myself back into the spirit of creation and output. And so that's what I'm doing. Getting the training wheels back on to start producing some content for 2025. Having said all that, it's interesting. I've really been sitting with what I wanted to start out with. And I've just noticed that every single time that I've thought about sitting down in front of this microphone and recording something, there's just been, again, an impulse in my body saying, you got to talk about LA, you got to talk about LA, you got to talk about LA. And it keeps taking me by surprise because I tend not to talk too much about current events. I mean, it's a pop culture podcast. It's a reality TV podcast, more or less. It's a Bravo podcast, more or less. That is my chosen area of focus. And I like it because it's a kind of a fun, non-divisive way to get into some really deep topics. But like I said, for some reason, every time I just thought about sitting down to record, something in me was just saying, like, it just felt like to start talking about the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills or like Dorit or Kyle or whatever. It just felt so strongly inside me, like you're skipping over something, you're skipping over something, you're skipping over something. You got to talk about LA. You got to talk about LA. So indulge me for a few minutes. I'm going to talk a little bit about LA and the LA fires. And then I thought after that, in the spirit of LA, I could touch down a little bit on Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, just kind of from a big picture perspective. And that's how we'll open the door into the 2025 season of the Deep Dive. And just one word of warning, guys, I have a feeling this is going to be a very kind of messy episode. I'm still very much in an inward place, and there are a lot of really deep feelings that come up around what's going on in LA. I can just sort of feel my mind is a little bit scattered. So, like I said, fair warning, this might be a little bit all over the place. Like I said, I'm going into the hot topic of LA If that's not of interest to you, feel free to skip to the end of this where I get a little bit into Beverly Hills. But if you're open to hearing about something outside the realm of reality TV and you're ready to go on this ride with me, well, buckle up, because here we go. As far as the LA fires go, and in terms of listening to the impulses in my body, I do feel an impulse just to start with what's going on from a personal perspective. I think, as most of you know, LA was my home for over 20 years. I left a year and a half ago, and I left in large part because of what's happening right now. And I'll explain more of that in a moment. But my thinking or my feeling or my impulse was just to start, yes, with my personal perspective, my personal experience of witnessing these fires, and then seeing how that might want to widen out to a bigger perspective, the macro perspective, what this might mean for the collective, both in terms of Los Angeles residents who are actually going through this in a more immediate way, but also in terms of the wider collective of people elsewhere in the country or elsewhere in the world. I think, as you all know by now, this podcast comes from the perspective that life is essentially a waking dream. And it plays out, yes, on the personal individual level, and it also plays out on the collective level. And that everything that we're seeing in front of us, whether it's playing out on our television screens or on our headlines, in some way is a reflection of what's going on a deeper level in terms of the collective experience. And that for even us as individuals navigating our individual lives, what's happening outside of us in the external world on the collective level is also a reflection of something in our own internal landscapes. So yeah, on that note, it just felt right to start with the micro, in this case, me, and my personal experience of this experience. And then, like I said, using that as a roadmap into whatever wants to come through on a more macro level for the collective, for you guys listening at home, both in terms of your individual journeys, but also what it might be revealing to us about the larger transpersonal journey for all of us as a collective. So, having said that, let me kind of drop in, as I say, and kind of sit with this for a moment. The LA fires. I just want to say, just even sitting here, oh yeah, it's like even just sitting here and holding the LA fires in my consciousness and in the field of this podcast, it just immediately there's so much feeling here. It just immediately brings up so much feelings inside of me, such a deep feeling of heartbreak, loss. The word I'm actually hearing is devastation. It's devastating. What's happening is devastating. Powerlessness, deep powerlessness, rage. Yeah, the collective voice I'm kind of hearing from LA is just how the fuck could something like this happen? This feels like it's going to the powers that be. I've got more to say about that because intuition's already been coming through me around all this. But yeah, devastation, powerlessness. I'm hearing a voice that's just saying, what the fuck is going on? Again, when I say that out loud, that to me reverberates not just on the local LA level, but I'm hearing that kind of almost on like a national or global level of just like, what the fuck is going on right now? And then, yeah, all of those feelings, those currents of energy, the heartbreak, the powerlessness, the rage, the grief, that feels like it could be playing out on a much larger level as well. So this is all just to say there's a lot of feeling here. And it just feels important to like let this feeling through, to not push it away, because I feel like that is a large part of what tends to happen in these experiences on a collective level. I think that just as a species, as a human race, we have not created a global culture of what it means to say yes to our feelings in a healthy, integrated way. I think we tend to avoid or fear our feelings and then we push them away. I saw this big time with COVID. I've said this before, I'll say it again. I still don't think we've integrated just the sheer trauma of COVID and what that was. We tend to push it away. we feel like we can't tolerate the feelings. We feel like there's not space for them. And yet the feelings are why we're here. So I just want to take a moment to just let these feelings be here and to say yes to all of them and to say, yes, we can tolerate them. We can create space for them. We can let them through. All right. So what I just want to say up top about LA in terms of just my own personal experience of witnessing these fires from afar, like I said, of course, it's devastating to watch. It's devastating to watch. And I wish I could say that it felt surreal to watch that footage. But the truth of the matter is, watching those images and watching that footage, to borrow the words from our Bravo narrator, Heather Gay, to me, it felt eerily familiar. And it felt eerily familiar because I honestly had a sense something like this was coming. It was a large part of why I left LA. Now, I wasn't getting specific images of wildfires per se. What I was getting more and more in the years leading up to my departure was just a sense that this city is not safe. That's how it felt to me. It just felt like I don't feel safe being here. It felt to me more and more like when I would be outside in the city or driving in my car in the city, it just was this distinct feeling. And, and guys, I'm just going to sort of speak very plainly and frankly to the way the voices came through me. And I don't mean to be glib about what's happening. It's just, these are the voices I heard. It was an energy moving through me that just said the city is going to a hell in a handbasket. Like the city's going down. I just felt that. It was this feeling in me like, there's not sufficient infrastructures to support the amount of people that are here. There's not sufficient infrastructure to support what's going on, like literally just in terms of the climate, in terms of natural resources, in terms of how the world is changing. And there's not sufficient infrastructure to support just, to get new agey about this, like the energy that's here. Like LA felt insane to me by the time that I left. Now, let me sort of pause and just say for context, I am someone who was there for over 20 years. And I actually am someone who loved LA for so long. I loved LA when I first got there. And I say that to really indicate that this feeling of a lack of safety and this feeling like I got to get out of here, this was new for me. And I say that especially as someone who was there long enough to remember when it wasn't always cool to love LA. I feel like now there's a lot of LA pride. In the last 10 years, it became cool and hip to love LA and to have pride in LA. When I first moved out to LA, it was not cool to love LA. In fact, it was the opposite. It was cool to shit on LA. Kind of like the best way I can describe it for anyone who's never lived there is in that same way, you know how sometimes there'll be that kind of culture of how you doing? Oh, I'm so busy. Like there's this charge that people will get out of talking about how busy they are and complaining how busy they are and complaining how overwhelmed they are. Like there's sort of a negative juice people can get out of that. I remember very distinctly, there would be a negative juice people would get out of being like, oh, LA sucks. LA is a shithole. LA sucks for all these reasons. And I just remember from the beginning, from the moment, literally that my plane touched down, and I remember being in a rental car and driving across the 10, I'm getting chills just remembering. I just felt at home. My heart was swelling driving down the 10. And, as someone who loved film and film history and film noir, just seeing the palm trees and being in the home of movies, I just felt so at home. And I remember just realizing that I never felt at home on the East Coast. It was my technical home. It was where I was born and raised. But I actually, once I got to LA, I was like, oh, I never felt at home on the East Coast. It was never a right fit for me. I love being in LA. And the last thing I'll say about that, part of what I loved about LA in particular is I just loved the free spirit of it. I experienced it immediately as kind of a come one, come all city. I just love that I could be in a Rite Aid and I could be rubbing elbows with a movie star and a business executive and a homeless person and a drag queen and, an aspiring artist. Everyone was there all at once. And it just felt like such freedom and permission just to be whoever the fuck you wanted to be, and that everyone was welcome. And I just loved that. I loved that it was this city of dreamers and artists who were coming to pursue their dreams. I just always felt this spirit of openness and, in a weird way, optimism. It was a city full of people who wanted to make things happen for themselves. So I loved that. There was so much I loved about LA. And I just loved the grittiness of it. And I loved the strip mall culture. I just loved all of it. I loved it. But all of this is just to say that, in the last several years leading up to my departure in 2023, it just really started shifting and the city felt different to me. It felt way more crowded. It felt way more aggressive. It felt angrier. It felt darker. And again, I would just walk around literally uncomfortable in my own skin. And just having this feeling, again, like the voice that comes through is the city is going down and I have got to get out of here. I have got to get out of here. And so I left. I followed the impulse and I left. I left the home that I knew for over 20 years. And literally the weekend that I left, this was a year and a half ago, that was the weekend where this weird hurricane suddenly came through LA. Like LA had never had a hurricane before. And I just remember thinking to myself, this is literally it. This is literally why I'm leaving. Literally a hurricane is coming through town. Like, what the F is going on? This town's going down. And so, I made the decision to leave and never looked back. And, every time I would see LA, like on Real Housewives of Beverly Hills or, on social media, again, I would just get the same feeling. I'd just be like, it's crazy there. It's crazy there. It's crazy there. It's going down. And I want to say more about what I mean when I say it's going down. I don't want this to be alarmist, especially for the people who are listening to this. I have a message for the people who are in LA. We'll get there. But again, that was just what I was experiencing inside my body. So yes, coming back around to the fires and just seeing the footage of the devastation and seeing, these neighborhoods that I know and love literally on fire and my friends having to evacuate their homes. When I saw this playing out and when I see this playing out, it just is a very familiar feeling inside of me of this is exactly what I was sensing was coming. And so that's why I say it feels eerily familiar. And it's interesting because these are thoughts I've shared with people in my personal life. When I talk about leaving LA, I would tell people I don't feel safe there anymore. I feel like it's going down. It's not anything I shared publicly, but I do feel an invitation now that I'm seeing this play out, and it really does kind of feel like almost watching a prophecy come true. I'm greeting this as an invitation to speak more about what I'm feeling about this, because I do have more feelings about it, and then we'll sort of see where this wants to go. I do stand by my feeling that there is not the proper infrastructure in place to support everything that's going on in LA. I do still have a feeling like LA is in danger. I do feel that strongly. I mean, I hate saying this, but if I trust the information in my body, I don't think this is the end. I think there's more to come. In fact, what I'm really hearing is we're just getting started. I think there's a lot more to come. And I want to say, I don't mean tomorrow, but I just mean big picture. This ain't the end. And, I think I'm saying this because part of what I feel is this sense like the city knows. That's really what I feel. I feel like the higher ups know. I feel like they knew this was coming. I feel like this isn't new information. I feel like they know this city is not prepared for all the possible disasters. And then it's just like the words I'm hearing are like head in the sand, look the other way, passing the buck. It's like, it almost reminds me of, let's say, climate change on a bigger level. It's like, we all know, most of us are in agreement, this is a real issue. And yet, and then of course there's some action being taken, but there's also kind of like there's something in us as a human race where it just seems like we kind of wait until the emergency happens in order to kick into action, rather than really taking in the information of like something's happening. It's almost like we just want to pretend like if we can just put our blinders on, we can sort of pretend like this isn't a pressing issue and hope that it goes away. And it's almost like, how this relates to me in terms of LA. What's coming through me on a governmental level or an establishment level is like, there are things we already should have been doing and we didn't do it. So now, rather than heeding this as a wake-up call of like, okay, well, let's heed the warning and move into action now. It's this sunk cost fallacy where it's this feeling like, well, we didn't do what we were supposed to do back then. So we want to just keep kind of ignoring the issue as much as possible, because if we don't ignore it, someone's going to have to answer for what we didn't do before. Someone's going to have to take responsibility for this. We don't want to do that. So let's just keep this all covered. It's like, let's just deal with these fires now and kind of sweep them under the rug as best we can and like just do our part to rebuild and kind of just hope that this all goes away. Again, it's just turn the other way, look the other way, head in the sand. I don't think anyone really wants to take responsibility for what's happening. And what I hear LA screaming in these fires, is like, don't look the other way. Like, look over here. Like, this city is on fire, literally and figuratively. The city ain't working. There is stuff we need to be looking at. Look at me. And I gotta say, even as I'm saying this, the energy of this feels like a fucking warning. And to me, it actually feels like a gentle warning. It feels like the voice I hear coming through these fires is, now is your chance to fucking look. Deal with me. And unfortunately, I don't think the city of LA is going to heed the warning, which is why I think there's going to be more to come. So there's a lot I already want to say about just this. I do think there is a resonant message here for the larger world. I think there's a metaphor here. And I want to say it's not lost on me at all that LA is, we could argue, the film capital of the world. Kind of a US-centric viewpoint. I know there are other film industries. I know believe me, no one knows more than I do. There's world cinema because I watch it all the time. But, I think it's safe to say that Hollywood is still the forerunner of movies and the stories that are getting told, the narratives that are getting told, and that Hollywood, for better or for worse, plays a huge role in shaping global culture and global narrative. And again, in the waking dream of life, I just feel like on a certain level, LA represents that notion of the narratives that are getting written. And so for me, it feels like LA is kind of like a little microcosm for global narrative. And so if I sort of take it in that way, it's this idea, there's sort of two things going on here. One, it's this principle that I've talked about before in other podcasts of, I think this world is reaching a breaking point, a saturation point where we no longer have the infrastructures to support everything that's going on. We no longer have the infrastructure to support what's going on ecologically, economically, politically, emotionally. We're reaching a breaking point where it just feels like our systems are breaking down and we don't have it baked in to the current structures to support what's currently going on. And I think the world is on fire. We're seeing that in so many different ways. So I just want to say, like, part of what's coming through me is that, again, like with LA, I think globally we're just getting started in terms of these unprecedented experiences. Again, I'm going back to COVID, right? That for us, for our lifetime, this was unprecedented. we'd never seen anything like this before. It almost feels like end times in a way. And I feel like, again, sort of what's going on politically in so many ways feels unprecedented. And what I see going on, I think that COVID really was, to me, like a gateway and a portal for this notion of the world going to hell in a handbasket. And when I say that, I don't mean that we're headed towards annihilation necessarily, but I do think what we're going towards is out with the old and with the new, hopefully in with the new. I feel like, again, we're getting the message of like the old way ain't working anymore. So it's going to keep breaking down and breaking down and breaking down until you get the fucking message. And I think we keep, in a way, being shocked by these things that happen. And I kind of want to say to people listening to this, again, I think we're just getting started. I think you need to, like, it's in the words of Big Brother, expect the unexpected. I think we all need to start getting used to the idea that the world as we know it, the world as it used to be, I don't think that's the world that we're moving towards anymore. And I just think there's going to be more unprecedented events. I think we're seeing more surreal things happening that almost feel like they defy explanation. And at a certain point, we just got to get used to the fact this is our new normal. Like, we got to stop being shocked and surprised because, again, I think it's the world telling us, you got to look at what's happening. You got to look at what's happening. You got to look at the way things aren't working anymore. So I think there's just sort of a message here for everyone on a global level in that regard. And so, yes, I do think there is an invitation for us to all look at what's happening, both in the world and in ourselves. That's sort of how that's the dance between the macro and the micro. I just feel this invitation for all of us to not look the other way anymore, to not look the other way in terms of what's going on globally, what's going on nationally, but also what's going on personally. So for me, like, just coming back to LA for a moment, I'm very aware, part of me doesn't want to sit here and say, hey, LA is going down and this is just getting started. Because I'm aware there are people who still live in LA, and I'm aware that there are people who are not going to move out of LA, and I'm aware there's people where it's not even an option to move out of LA, and I don't want this to be like a prophecy of doom and gloom. When I say LA is going down, I don't mean like everyone who's living there is going to, inevitably die or anything like that. It does mean that I do think there's more coming. And so what I would say to people who are in LA and who are going to be in LA, and by the way, I still have this feeling like I'm not fully done with LA. I don't think I'll be a permanent resident again, but I do strongly suspect I'll be there in some shape, form, or fashion as the years unfold. So the idea is just, again, don't look the other way. Meaning, if you're someone who lives in LA right now, take in what's going on and take in the possibility that this could very well happen again. And so if you trust the information that's coming from the universe, and if you trust your own body knowing that LA is the place for you to be right now, let yourself have all those threads, but then really be with this notion of, if I don't look the other way, how do I want to navigate this? So just on a fundamental level, if you're someone who's living in LA, it's like, okay, where in LA do I want to live? What neighborhood feels safe to me? Where am I drawn to in terms of acting on my own best behalf? How do I want to prepare for possible future disasters? Do I want to have a situation set up where I know exactly where I'm going and I have a place to stay if there's another instance where I need to evacuate? Do I have my emergency kit set up? And again, I just keep coming back to this question of like, where does it feel right for me to live in this city? What kind of home does it feel right for me to live in? So again, it's not that we have to reactively flee, nor do we have to stick our heads in the sand. This is where faith comes in, right? This is where we connect with inner knowing and divine guidance. If the circumstances of my life are such that I am meant to be here right now, and I don't have an impulse like Jamie telling me to go, and if I don't ignore the possibility that there is more coming, And if I trust that this is all taking me wherever I'm meant to go, how do I want to be here? And let yourself get quiet and create time and space to receive those answers. And then when you receive those answers, act on them. And again, I think this is a principle that really can apply to all of us as individuals in our personal lives, right? It's like the questions I'm hearing are, where are you currently not looking in your life? Where are you turning a blind eye to things that are not working because it's just easier to not look? Where are you turning a blind eye to things that are not working because you're maybe scared of feeling your feelings or being an emotional reality? Where are you turning a blind eye to things that are perhaps not working because maybe there's something you don't want to have to take responsibility for? Again, if we sort of look at LA and what's going on in the collective as a metaphor, as a collective invitation to look at our own participation in this waking dream called life. And if we trust this information that there is this possible voice coming from the city of storytelling, the city of narrative, the city of global stories, a voice that's saying, look over here, pay attention to me. This ain't working and this ain't working, this ain't working. Stop looking the other way. What are you avoiding in your own life? Where's the simmering fire that might turn into an explosion if you keep looking in the opposite direction? I just feel such an invitation here on a more macro level to really invite in this question of, what am I not wanting to look at? What have I not been wanting to look at? What do I hope just goes away? Again, what is it in my life that fundamentally isn't working that I haven't been wanting to look at? And what would it mean to let myself look, to heed this warning that is coming out of the city of storytelling, and to look at something that maybe I haven't wanted to look at, and to let myself get into relationship with it gently, slowly, over time. This doesn't have to be an all or nothing thing, but to let myself open the door and to stop ignoring these little flickering embers that might tomorrow blow up into a flame. I think we've all experienced it, right? We ignore the little fires in our primary relationship because we don't want to look. Then suddenly we're breaking up or getting a divorce. We ignore little things at the workplace. Suddenly there's a huge drama and we're getting fired. Energy is energy, and it doesn't die just because we look in the opposite direction. Things actually gain power and traction in the shadows of the unconscious. And the truth is always going to prevail one way or the other. And so sometimes we look the other way because there's a false sense of safety and not knowing. And we have perhaps a kind of fight or flight, do or die fear that the truth is going to annihilate us, when in fact it's actually the opposite. Usually, as they say, the truth sets you free. Usually looking at the truth creates space and room for clarity. Usually looking at the truth creates room for a whole new alchemy. And the last thing I'll say about it is just, again, speaking to this notion of like the fight or flight fear that if I look at things that I'm scared to look at, it's going to like overwhelm me and devour me. Trust me, as someone who works with people on a very deep level, that's an image of the fight or flight fear. It's the image of the scared inner child. There is very rarely a situation where there's not an option for you to get into gentle relationship with the truth over time. And getting into gentle relationship with the truth over time doesn't mean you have to make big, scary decisions right away. It just means you're letting yourself explore something for yourself. So like I just said with the people in LA, it's just about acknowledging the reality that this might not be over. And so you drop inside yourself, you gather information, and you sit with it. And then you let spirit come in, or whatever you want to call it, intuition come in, and you create room and space for divine guidance, and then you don't take action until you're ready. the most common example that I can think of in terms of, my clients and, the recurring themes that I see, people being so scared to acknowledge they're not happy in their relationship because they think that means, boom, it immediately means I'm going to have to leave them tomorrow. And it's just like, slow down, slow the fuck down. That's not what it means. It just means maybe, you're going and finding a therapist that you really like, and you're starting to just let yourself be honest about the truth of how you feel. You don't have to do anything about it yet. You just want to start exploring. Start taking gentle steps. Start slowly building a new infrastructure. Rome wasn't built in a day. As humans, we're not meant to change everything overnight. It can be a slow, steady, gentle process where you just gather information, you take gentle steps, and nothing has to happen before you're ready. I just keep going back to COVID. I just remember when COVID broke out, just how quickly so many people were rushing to make meaning of it. And okay, I'm going to write my screenplay now, and I'm going to write my book. And it just felt like there was this rush to be productive. And I remember just from me in my own corner, as someone who really likes to hold space for the bigger picture, and as someone who likes to move slowly, and as someone who likes to take in information before I move into action, I just remember sitting there thinking, what the fuck is going on? Like, is anyone taking this in on a deeper level? This is insanity. Why are we acting like this is normal? And I think there's still so much unprocessed emotion from what we went through. And I don't think it's a coincidence that my feelings around LA being unsafe really skyrocketed through COVID. Like LA, again, and if I sort of hold it as a little kind of microcosm or metaphor for the narrative of the world, the stories of the world, LA felt crazy after COVID. It felt crazy after COVID. It felt manic. It felt congested. It felt busy. It felt dirty. It just felt fucking frantic. And I kind of get that feeling from the world at large. So what I'll say to wrap this up is LA, anyone listening to this from LA, my heart is with you. I'll actually say one of the gifts of this is it actually really reconnected me to my love of LA. When people ask me where I'm from, I still say LA. I say LA. I don't say I'm from the East Coast. I don't say I'm from Boston. I say I'm from LA. And I actually, for the first time since I left, I have a feeling to go back soon. Like, I don't know. I have this impulse to want to go back. So to LA, I want to say my heart is with you. To LA itself, I want to say my heart is with you. And I just want to acknowledge LA as the place that was my home for several decades, and acknowledge LA as the place where I did feel at home for the first time. And I felt something in my own heart reflected back to me by the come one, come all free spirit vibration of this city of storytelling and dreams. And as I say that, I once again just feel that scrappy, open-minded, freewheeling, manifest destiny spirit of LA, where people go to become fucking movie stars and to tell their stories and to live the American dream, for better or for worse. And I do want to say, as a final note, it's interesting. Like, I feel myself moving from that initial heartbreak and powerlessness to a sense of hope and optimism. And I think for me, in terms of just looking at all this as metaphor, that is the power of the willingness to not look the other way. We're so strong. We're so resilient. We have it in us to tolerate reality, to tolerate emotional reality, to take responsibility for our mistakes, to be in working relationship with a higher plan. We do not have to default to the false comfort, the false safety of living in denial. We can rise to the occasion of looking at what's here, taking responsibility for it, and getting into active relationship with it for the sake of the highest good. So, yeah, I think the last thing I want to say to you guys is I'm sitting here feeling so much emotion. Obviously, I consider myself a very sensitive channel who's very sensitive to energy that's out there. And I say that because I know a lot of my listeners are the same way. And just to really confirm and acknowledge that there is so much happening in the world right now. And it is okay to feel these feelings. Like right now, I'm just letting myself feel them, feeling the devastation, the heartache, the powerlessness, the rage. It's as simple as what I'm doing right now. And I think I'm saying this because I know a lot of people sometimes perhaps feel overwhelmed by their sensitivity, or they are somewhat aware that they're perhaps feeling things not just for themselves, but for the collective. And then they don't know what to do with that. And again, it starts to shift into this do or die fight or flight fear of like, if I let myself open to this, it's going to overtake me and overwhelm me. And I just want to say, no, 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 no. That's a lie of the mind. That's a lie of the ego. It's literally as simple as what I'm doing right now. I am just literally letting myself sit with these feelings. I'm letting them reverberate through my heart. I am speaking them through this microphone. I am not pushing them away. I am naming them and I'm acknowledging them. And I want to say that part of the reason why I'm articulating this is because I want to model it can be as simple as just taking 15 minutes or half an hour, sitting with yourself, going inward and just letting yourself be with the feelings. But also the reason why I'm saying this is because this is powerful for the world. This is the principle of change. This is principle of creation. The micro change leads to the macro change. If we're saying we want to live in a different world where people do take responsibility for themselves, where we're not pushing scary things away, if we want to live in a more integrated world where we are supported by the infrastructures we're creating, it starts with us. So if you are someone who is blessed with a heightened sensitivity that makes you a wide open channel for the collective, let yourself embody that. It's an important role. It's an important fucking role. It reminds me of like the scene of an emergency or an accident. Like they're going to be the first responders, right? They're going to be the people who like drive the ambulance and perform CPR. And they're going to be the people who are calling 911 and saying, do you need help? Those people are necessary. Awesome. Like they perform an important role. But there are other roles to be played too. There are the people who it isn't in their nature to be the first responder, but it is in their nature to witness, to stand, I don't want to say on the sidelines, because I don't think that's the right language. I mean, to physically stand on the side, but energetically be present by holding space for what's happening, by being the witness, by holding space for the bigger picture, for being the one who allows the deeper feelings to come through. It is a powerful role. It's a powerful spoke on this wheel of life. It is one that I hold. I've mentioned before that, I have training in therapeutic group facilitation, and I've been in many, many, many groups. I've led many, many, many groups. And I'll tell you, when shit goes down in those group situations and there's deep feelings and deep emotions, yeah, there are a lot of people who are the first responders. They're going in, they're lending their support in a very hands-on way. And I'll tell you, sometimes that was me, rarely, but I almost always was the one who stood on the outside and in a very present way held space for the bigger picture. And, then I was the one who could bring through the deeper messages. I could bring through the deeper threads. I could connect the deeper wisdom. I could bring through the unclaimed voices that wanted to be brought through. It's a powerful role. And so I'm saying this just to support those people out there, because I have a feeling a lot of my listeners are like this. If you are someone who feels what's going on in the world deeply, just let yourself feel it and know that it's important for you. It's important for the world. There's wisdom that wants to come through. And that is the type of micro change that leads to macro change. So, yeah, I'm just going to take a moment just to kind of pause, let this move through. All right. Yeah. Let's shift a little to the stories coming out of LA, the narratives coming out of LA. In this case, the reality TV narratives, the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills is on fire. And actually, it is on fire. Dorit's on fire. Kyle's on fire. There's a lot of heat in the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills this season. A lot of buried anger rising up. So yeah, in spirit with the rest of this episode, I'm just going to keep this big picture for now. Just kind of touch on it and then probably do some subsequent episodes that go deeper. But I think it's clear that the big picture of what we're watching this season is Kyle versus Dorit. It's really interesting because it's almost like if there were ever a time where the two of them should be closer than ever, it's now, because they're both going through something so similar in terms of their separations and possible divorces. And yet this is the moment where they are very much butting heads in a way that I feel like is taking them both into very deep places inside of themselves. And that's really what I see going on here, bigger picture. This really feels like a classic case to me of Dorit and Kyle unintentionally, unknowingly, unconsciously really hitting each other in core wounds. And, in a way, it makes total sense to me from a place of, looking at this as the waking dream of life. Their lives are getting, it's very sort of metaphorical of what I've been talking about on a global level. Their lives are getting dismantled right now in a big way. I mean, literally, like their lives are getting dismantled. The homes they've known, the families they've known, the marriages they've known, the identities they've carved out for themselves are really getting dismantled. The personal narratives that they've been living, Kyle as a producer, kind of a covert producer of the show, Dorit as sort of this ridiculous caricature of herself. These narratives are getting unraveled. Their lives are getting unraveled. And in that, their core wounds are getting poked and prodded and inflamed. Oh, it gets me excited just talking about it. There's so much opportunity here for both of them. So if I just kind of keep going with this big picture, I'll just talk through the brushstrokes of the core wounds that I see playing out and kind of my big picture sense of the pattern playing out here for both of them. I think on a fundamental level, I think that Dorit is very accurately identifying a pattern or a theme in her friendship with Kyle. I think that Kyle, big picture, has very much taken Dorit for granted. I think that Kyle hasn't necessarily taken Dorit completely seriously. When I look at the trajectory of Kyle on the show, because I've dropped into Kyle before towards Dorit and even towards people like Sutton. And one thread that really does tend to come through me for her towards friends like this on the show is a sense of, I'm hearing the words like dance, monkey dance, like kind of like you owe me. It's kind of like a voice that says something like, yeah, you should be grateful for my friendship. Like I'm essentially the reigning queen of this show. And I'm giving you the gift of my friendship and all its many perks and benefits. And I think, what I want to say about this, just in terms of the whole history of the show, I'm always very aware that Kyle got a wake-up call early on. Kyle learned a lesson early on. We saw her more in her mean girl phase, I think, in the first 2 seasons of the show. And then I think the wake-up call came second season when she went after Brandy and was quite cruel to Brandy. And I think we all know that didn't quite go the way she thought it was going to go. It's so crazy to think about those early years. It was so long ago. But, this was in the early stages of the Housewives. You could even say the early stages of this, this phase of reality TV. And yeah, I think Kyle thought that was going to go a certain way. She had a great first season. She came out on top in her feud with Camille. And I think she thought she was going to win again when it came to Brandy. And there was a brutal wake-up call when the audience very much turned on her. Now, I think Kyle's savvy. I think she's smart. I think she really learned a lesson. It wasn't lost on me from that moment forward. Kyle always made a point of being nice and welcoming to the new people. I think she learned the lesson. Don't, you never know which way this is going to go. It doesn't pay to be mean. It pays to be nice. And I think that she very intentionally softened something inside of herself. And I want to say this isn't even like a judgment. I don't think there's anything wrong with softening. I think it's to her credit that she, I think a lot of her more rigid black or white thinking, I think a lot of her default judgmental meanness got softened. Definitely it rears its head in moments, but she softened something. And so as a result of that, I think she became a lot more open to being open to different types of people and personalities on the show. And I think she developed friendships with people who, we might call the oddballs, the misfits, or the underdogs. And I think she has extended herself to people who maybe she might not have extended herself to as openly back in the day. And so, yeah, I sometimes get this sense that there's perhaps this feeling in her, almost like she's doing people a favor. It's like, again, I am the queen bee. I'm the reigning queen of the show. And I'm sort of bringing you into my world. I'm being open to you. I'm being soft with you. I'm cultivating a friendship with you. And yeah, just a little bit of a feeling like I'm doing you a favor by letting you in. I'm making a choice to welcome you with open arms and to bring you into my world. And I kind of get this feeling in that place, if I'm right about this, that there is perhaps a part of her that sort of feels like she's owed something, like, again, dance, monkey dance, like play by my rules, show me a certain type of loyalty. Like I on some level, there is a kind of hierarchy in my mind, and I'm high on the hierarchy, and you're kind of lucky to be a part of my hierarchy. And guys, I want to be clear. I'm not saying this is the only thread in her. Again, we're multifaceted human beings, and relationships are multifaceted. I am sure there is also genuine love and affection and kindness. It's just that I feel the possibility of these different types of threads. So for Kyle, I feel like there is this possibility, like when I take in Dorit, of, seeing Dorit in all of, because again, Dorit showed up in kind of a ridiculous way for a number of years. Like she was sort of a larger than life caricature. It's the ongoing joke. She's long-winded. She goes on and on. She's got her head in the clouds. Dorit is not someone who is presented as like a grounded force to take seriously. And I think there is a part of Kyle that hasn't taken her seriously. And again, I think there's a part of Kyle that has kind of like expected Dorit to essentially play by her rules. And I think that's why Kyle tends to get so incensed when Dorit doesn't play by the rules. So, one of the things that really bothered Kyle was when Dorit called out her kind of mess of a fashion line a few years ago. And it's interesting because that was actually one of the few moments where I really liked Dorit, where, I felt Dorit more grounded. It was like, oh, Dorit's actually embodying something a little bit more grounded and serious. Like this is her wheelhouse. She knows what she's doing and she's calling something out of Kyle. And I don't think Kyle liked it. I don't think Kyle liked Dorit stepping out of her role. It's like there's a role you're supposed to play. So the reason why I'm saying all of this is coming back to Dorit. I've explored this before. I think if you go back and listen, I think it was my episode that explored the conflict between Dorit and Garcelle. I really picked up, in terms of pattern, this possible historical thread where Dorit doesn't get taken seriously. I remember it came through so strongly. It was this feeling almost like with Dorit as a young girl, having some energetic relationship to chaos, not knowing what's going on, and kind of being left out in the cold, like a girl who's like trying to get in the room to find out what's going on with the adults, but the adults are locking the door. And sort of no one's really taking her seriously. And they're sort of like, hush, hush, Dorit. There, Dorit. And sort of like this lost girl clamoring for attention however she can get it, and not being taken seriously by the adults, and sort of being shushed up. And that creating a kind of energetic groove for her where she continues to play that role of like the lost little girl who's not taken completely seriously. And it was interesting because after it was an episode in the last few seasons after the home invasion where she actually did talk about, I forget the exact memory she recalled, but she actually talked about being a fearful girl and there being some relationship to like feeling unstable and her father just telling her like, chin up, get through it. And it kind of reflected my experience, this sort of core experience of just, again, like a lost little girl whose sort of deeper needs aren't being tended to and who's not getting taken seriously, like her needs and her wants being taken seriously. And sort of like this girl who feels like she has to play the part of an adult and keep her chin up for the sake of belonging in the larger system, and how that sort of masks a deeper rage and fear because like no one's really sort of hearing her cry for help. So this is all just to say, like, I feel like Dorit has a historical relationship to not being taken seriously, for her concerns not being taken seriously, and in a way being disregarded and left behind. And again, kind of receiving a message of like, oh, Dorit, just play your role, play your part. That's how you fit in. Like, don't freak out. Don't speak up. Just there, Dorit. Be good. Be quiet. Be good. And I kind of feel like you see that pattern even possibly playing out with PK, right? Where, you know, even just as far as the little that we've seen of them exploring the aftermath of the home invasion, it's like you kind of see Dorit trying to assert her needs, you know, trying to say like, I'm traumatized. There's more I need from you. And then PK kind of embodying this voice of like, yeah. I mean, I think he even literally said parts of it feel real, parts of it don't feel real. You know, I mean, I'm laughing because it's so horrible. It's just like this voice, this outside voice that's kind of minimizing Dorit's deep experience and sort of saying, come on, Dorit, I want you to be the Barbie doll. I want you to be the woman who is a social butterfly. I want you just like, there, Dorit, just play the part, look pretty, be ridiculous. I don't want to hear anything else. And Dorit spoke in the last episode kind of about this way in which she felt like she bent over backwards to protect PK, to support PK. And it really feels to me like there's a lot she sort of drove underground, and there's a lot of her voice that she stifled in order to support this man and whatever kind of like chaotic life he had going on, right? Let me just be quiet and be the good girl. Let me play the part of the ridiculous trophy wife. Let me focus on my clothes. Let me be pretty. Let me be the social butterfly, right? And she spoke about it. It's this notion of the moment she starts to speak up, the moment she starts to take a stand for her true feelings, the moment she starts to really acknowledge the truth of what's going on, it's this feeling like PK's out. He wants to separate. He wants a divorce. Right. And then there's this sort of rage that's emerging from her of like, Jesus fucking Christ. Like, I compromised so much for you. And now you're not even willing to hear me, see me, or take me seriously. Again, I sort of view life as reverberations of pattern. I just sort of see something possibly tracking through Dorit's entire life. And this angry voice that's sort of saying, like, I'm not here to play anymore. Take me seriously. I've got something to say. I feel like that started in childhood. And now it's working its way through her marriage. But the reason why I'm saying all this is, yes, I think that because of what she's going through with PK, something's starting to get liberated in her. And then she's looking at Kyle. And Kyle is someone who has perhaps approached her from this place of, Dorit, settle down, pipe down, play by the rules, look and sound cute, and sort of do what I want you to do. And it's almost like all that disowned rage that really wants to go to PK, or that even really wants to go to her family of origin, let's say, it feels like it's going to Kyle. And, I want to be clear. I'm sure she is articulating things to PK as well. But what just came through me as I was saying this is I can imagine as Dorit, if there's part of her that still has an investment in the marriage possibly working out, she might not be bringing the full force of her intensity, her rage, and her powerful no to PK. I mean, again, we're not seeing a ton on camera, but it sounds like PK is the one who's calling the shots. I mean, we saw him drop the bomb, like, we're not going to be talking so much anymore. We hear her repeatedly saying he dropped the bomb about the separation. He dropped the bomb about divorce and therapy. It does feel like there's a way in which even as Dorit's finding more of her voice, she's still kind of at the whims of PK's chaotic process. And perhaps she's not fully bringing the intensity of her rage to him because there's still a fear if she does that, it's really going to rock the boat in an irreparable way. So I can imagine if that's possibly true, here's Kyle as this kind of like symbol or this placeholder of the voice that doesn't take her seriously and is basically saying, there, Dorit, mind your P's and Q's, play by the rules. And it's kind of like Kyle's getting the full brunt of her fucking rage. Now, it's interesting because in a way it feels great as a viewer, just because I think, for me as Jamie, it always feels great when people seize their feelings, they claim their powerful voice, they're not going to like compromise themselves anymore. And I can feel the heat in Dorit. And I will say it's the most I've ever liked her. There's something coming through that just feels so much more real than she's ever been, so much more grounded than she's ever been. And she's calling real stuff out about Kyle. I mean, she really is. Now, I do want to say, having said that, I am also aware she's bringing a lot of heat to Kyle. And even though there's a certain charge I can get out of that as a viewer, I'm also very aware I don't think Kyle deserves all this heat. I do think that Dorit is naming things that are true and that she has every right to name in her friendship with Kyle. But there's a level of fury and rage that she's bringing to Kyle that I don't actually think is actually about Kyle. I think it's about this deeper pattern. And I don't think it's necessarily fair to bring it to Kyle. Now, the reason why I'm saying this is that I then think Dorit using Kyle almost as like a whipping post for her disowned rage is then triggering some of Kyle's core wounds. Because I think we've seen this, right? We've seen this play out with Kim. We've seen this play out with Kathy. Kyle tends to be, and in some ways, this is where sort of Kyle and Dorit have something in common. I think they both have a relationship to sort of playing the part of like the disempowered little girl in their family systems. And I have to imagine there's mileage they get out of that. Like there's rewards they got from that. There's a way that it worked for them, but there's also a price they paid from that. And you see it. It's like, this all played out with Kathy. Like Kathy used Kyle as like a whipping post for her rage. And we saw Kim do the same thing. And I have to imagine this is something that's played out a lot in Kyle's life, where she becomes the receiving end of rage that's not hers to take. She takes the brunt of rage that's not hers to take. People like Kathy Hilton use Kyle as a scapegoat for their punishing rage rather than taking responsibility for their own anger. And so I think when Dorit starts doing that to Kyle, it triggers Kyle's disowned rage. The voice in her that wants to stop. She said it once at a reunion, stop. Well, she said to Kim, "You're so fucking mean." But the words I'm hearing are, stop being so fucking mean to me. Stop using me as a scapegoat for your fucking rage. Stop using me as your whipping girl. I don't deserve this. Leave me alone. And then what's so interesting is Kyle getting so triggered by Dorit's rage and reacting with her own rage then makes Dorit feel as though she's once again not being seen and heard, which again then triggers her core wound of not being taken seriously, which then triggers her even deeper level of rage, which then triggers Kyle's Kyle's even deeper level of rage because she's once again getting activated in the place where she's bearing the brunt of rage that she doesn't deserve. And so I just think this is a classic example of like two people who are lost inside their own stories. And in this dance of relationship, they are butting up against each other's core wounds. And then they're acting out these stories where they just keep repeating the pattern over and over and over. And so, yeah, that's kind of like the bigger picture of the energetic scheme I'm seeing here. Kyle not taking Dorit seriously, wanting her to play by the rules, that triggering a historical story in Dorit, triggering her deep unexpressed rage, which she then leverages at Kyle in a furious way, which then triggers Kyle's historical rage over being unfairly used and abused as people's punching bags. All right, you guys. So that's my first little entryway into Beverly Hills. Obviously, there's so much here. I'm actually really, really drawn to Kyle this season, almost more than Dorit, because I really see her bumping up against something. It's just, she's getting called out. And it's just the very epitome and essence of this notion of her old way is not working for her anymore. Her old way of playing the producer, I think her old way of also playing the part of like the kind of theatrical little kid, like the way that she will mug for the camera and her jaw will drop and the way that she flees the room in tears. There's this role that she plays. It just feels like this little girl, like she still feels like that little actress, who was in Halloween or in Little House on the Prairie. And like I said, like there's just this mileage that she learned to get out of being the theatrical little girl who makes the big faces and has the big emotions and stomps her feet. And I can just feel it. It's not working for her anymore. Again, I just keep feeling that parallel to the world at large. The systems of Kyle Richards' life are breaking down. Her marriage is breaking down. Her family is breaking down. Her role on the show is breaking down, and fires are popping up. And I think there's a real invitation right now for her to look at what's not working and why. So maybe we'll go into a lot more of that in episodes to come. All right, you guys, we did it. As always, follow me on Instagram if you don't already, JAMIESTEIN, where I have exclusive content. And if you're curious about my work and perhaps what patterns you might be unconsciously living right now and how to get underneath them so that you can claim your rightful pattern of embodiment and stepping into the truth of who you are and who you're meant to be in this lifetime, send me an email through my website, hollywoodreadings.com. All right, you guys, thanks for bearing with me. Thanks for being patient in my gap. 2025 is off to its start. We'll see where this all wants to go and see you on the flip side. Bye.